that he likes. He has, and we are underway here in game number 1 between Mann and Davis. White Blue Heroic to kick things off with a Temple of Enlightenment. Top card will become the bottom one there for Mann. Davis, well, he's got a Temple of Enlightenment as well. He'll take a look at his top card. Last Breath is what he's looking at. Pretty good card in this matchup. Yep. Leave it on top.
And clearly aware of what Stephen Mann is playing. Temple of Enlightenment could imply a blue-white control deck on Stephen Mann's side of the table, but if Jim left Last Breath on top, it means he knows what he's playing against.
Yeah, given that these players did play in the same tournament in the Players' Championship just a couple weeks ago, it doesn't surprise you to see them both playing the exact same decks that they played there. Mann with just a flooded strand passing the turn back. Davis will play an island. He'll kick the turn back over to Mann. And we saw Mann come out with this kind of start the last time we watched him play earlier today, which was he's not going to tap out to play a creature if he doesn't have to. He'd rather play something like a Battle-Wise Hoplite on turn number 3 with mana available. And it looks like he's going to take that route again. This time it's going to be Hero of Iroas, however.
There's slightly different pressure on Steve in this matchup, though, because Jim has Nullify and Dissolve. So it's not as simple as get something into play and protect it. He's also got his way around Jim's counterspells. And the answers to the counterspells are play your stuff early and often. The answers to the removal spells is play slowly. And so Stephen Mann's in a bit of a squeeze as a result.
Davis going to go with a Last Breath. Going to target the Hero of Iroas. It looks like Mann is going to have a God's Willing for that very, very quickly.
Well, not necessarily. This could just be something that triggers Heroic. I mean, Defiant Strike gets the job done here.
Well, it looks like it's going to get the job done, as that will trigger Heroic, make that a little bit bigger, out of Last Breath range. Of course, it'll cantrip, and we'll go back Davis's way. Davis draws a copy of Divination for the turn. There is a Flooded Strand, so he'll quickly sacrifice that. Go down to 19, search up either an island or a plains, as he does consult his hand before doing so. He does have a Banishing Light, also has the option with Divination here too. Wonder if he wants to draw cards or just kill the creature.
Oh, I think priority 1 is just keep the board clean. If you tap out here for a Divination, you may not get another opportunity to remove Hero of Iroas from play.
Well, there is Banishing Light, so he will take the opportunity to kill the creature. And we're going to send it back Stephen Mann's way. Mann will draw. Looks like it's a copy of Favorite Hoplite, so another creature. Will go along with Stratus Walk in his hand as well. It is fascinating to find that he does have 4 copies of Stratus Walk. Typically, you see, if you're familiar with the Tom Ross build, one of those to find with Heliod's Pilgrim. Mann doesn't have Heliod's Pilgrim in his main deck.
Yeah, I think a part of this is just having a density of things that trigger Heroic at a low opportunity cost, much like Defiant Strike. Or deal with Heliod or deal with Thassa, those are really potent, but they do open yourself up to get naturally 2 for 1. Your creature gets killed, the following turn or what have you, and you're just down the card. Stratus Walk allows you to trigger Heroic without being down cards, assuming the Stratus Walk resolves.
3 mana, it's time for Divination. Jim needs some cards, so he'll draw 2. Dissolve is 1. Jason Ingenuity is 2. The question is, does he have the land? He does. You see the Polluted Delta there. So he'll play that. And I'll pass the turn back over to Mann.
And he elected not to play the Polluted Delta first, signifying that he is happy if that Divination got hit with a Stubborn Denial.
Perhaps Stubborn Denial, however, not on his radar here, game number 1. We don't see it main deck that much.
I believe Tom Ross's build typically plays 1 in the main deck.
Here's an ordeal.
But it is possible he's saying, I would rather, be able to play, it comes into play tap land this turn if I draw it. That could be another factor as well.
This would be a big turn here for Stephen Mann. That's 2 ordeal of Thassa's. All Jim can do is shrug his shoulders and say, yeah, I'm about to take a whole bunch of damage here, about to draw a whole bunch of cards. So trigger them both. He'll shortcut a little bit here, but 4 cards coming here for Mann. He's got to like his spot right now.
And this is a really important opportunity for Steve to take here, which is if Jim has nothing, he's made a huge threat, and Jim's in a ton of trouble. And even if Jim untaps and responds with some sort of answer, Steven's drawn so many cards that he doesn't really care that much.
Davis will draw. He's in a little bit of trouble right now, but that 5th land does allow him to cast End Hostilities if he'd like to. But given that Mann has just drawn 4 cards, this exchange is one that Steve Mann probably does not mind. Davis will sacrifice both of his fetch lands, go a little bit lower here to 11. Island and a plains coming. Perhaps just 2 islands, okay. Wasn't sure if you want to search up another plains with the Flooded Strand, but he'll go with 2 blue sources.
I think the reason is because he has Nullifies and Dissolves. He could be in spots where he needs a lot of blue mana.
And there's End Hostilities. But again, I don't think that's an exchange that Mann minds at this point, given that he has just drawn 4 cards to make it 5 after he draws a card for the turn. Now, how he wants to pace things here will be a little bit interesting because he is working his way into the territory against blue-white control where Elspeth is a consideration. additional copies of Hostilities, some other large spells that Davis has access to.
Normally, when White Blue Heroic draws this many cards, if a control player taps out and it doesn't involve cleaning up the entire board, White Blue Heroic can really capitalize.
It's a Battle-Wise Hoplite, a favorite Hoplite, and a passing of the turn. So just redeploying threats. Very simply there is Mann. Tranquil Cove. Very simple. Just playing that, passing the turn is Davis. Does have Jason's Ingenuity in hand.
Also has the ability to dissolve and dig through time in the same turn.
Pretty good
So
turn.
a lot of good options. There's still the question of how does he actually answer what's happening right now.
I have a feeling he's going to be relying pretty heavily on finding another copy of Hostilities.
Yeah, I would say so.
Does have 3 copies in his main deck, already has used 1.
I like Steven Mann's hand is a little anemic at this spot. He just does not have a lot of spells to really follow up with. A handful of creatures is not good for him right now because he's most concerned with end hostilities.
Three damage, simple enough. Just a land and a passing of the turn. So you can see both players kind of picking their spots now. When to make a move, when to hold back.
Well, both players definitely respect the tricks that each other bring to the table.
Yeah. Davis is going to go reaching for mana here. So does he want to just dig through time? Does he want to cast Jason's Ingenuity? Jim certainly has some options here. It looks like he wants to dig. And he is leaving the 1 mana open, so he is very conscious of Stubborn now. This is the second time we've kind of seen him play with it in mind.
Yeah, and this might be also a spot where Jim is just saying, I don't really have the luxury of Jason's Ingenuity because I need to find end hostilities right now. So I need to give myself maximum looks. It is the least mana efficient play available because he could Ingenuity first and then be able to cast his 2 mana dig through time in a more convenient spot.
Interesting play here by Mann. He's going to Defiant Strike on the Battle-Wise Hoplite. Scry. Now draw. And perhaps he's in search of a Stubborn now, as I don't believe he has one in his hand. And he does not. So, Davis will look at 7. Take 2 of them with him.
And that's really valuable for Jim because now he knows the coast is clear.
Yeah.
If he's able to find end hostilities, it's probably good to go. Because if Steve was willing to do that play, it was probably because he was in search of a Stubborn Denial.
What's interesting, too, right now is that you would think a card like Elspeth is probably pretty good on this board, right? You see he's got 2 ground creatures, 3 soldiers, just jump block for a little while. You know, if they get pretty big, then you can minus Elspeth. But one thing that Mann has in his deck that most builds don't have, 4 copies of Stratus Walk.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to tap out for blockers against White Blue Heroic because they just have so many effects that make it so you're unable to block. Even if Jim doesn't get killed, there's a very good chance he loses the Elspeth, and the tokens left over don't matter very much.
Elspeth looks like one of the cards that Jim has selected in this situation. Evolving Wilds the draw for the turn. 2 of in Davis's deck.
Yeah, Jim playing with a couple extra sack lands to facilitate his delve spells. So 2 copies of Polluted Delta, even though there's no swamps to get. A couple copies of Evolving Wilds, even though it's not the most efficient mana fixer.
Here is Elspeth. That will resolve. Soldier tokens coming in. Elspeth will take up to 5. Evolving Wilds will come in. And that'll be it for Davis's turn. Though, one thing his deck gets to do that other decks don't, the ability to represent actually casting a spell here in Devouring Light.
Yep. I believe a couple copies in the main deck.
Just one this
Just
weekend.
one in the main deck?
We have seen the numbers fluctuate for him. The upkeep, it'll be a God's Willing. Trigger Scry on the Battle-Wise Hoplite, and you'll have Scry from God's Willing. Man, gonna think this one over.
Yeah, he can set this to white, which means he doesn't have to worry about Elspeth, and he doesn't have to worry about Devouring Light. He gets 2 scries, one from the God's Willing and one for the Battle-Wise Hoplite. Puts him in a good position to try to find the kill this turn.
We'll scry to the bottom action here. So I'll scry with God's Willing. That one's going to go to the bottom too. So mystery card coming here for Mann for his draw step.
Stubborn Denial is not exactly what Steven was looking for, I'm sure, but I think he'll happily take it.
Yeah, it's a little late to the party, but it's still going to be able to do plenty in this game.
Because Steven Mann's likely to be able to make a big push this turn, and then most likely be able to fend off Jim even if he draws something big like End Hostilities.
Now he wants to sequence things. Well, that's another story. And that's the tough part here, and he's certainly going to try to figure it out.
There's some complexity here because if he pumps his creature large but to a non-lethal spot, he needs to kill Elspeth. Because Elspeth's minus then takes care of his creature. So it puts him in a position where he's got to find a way to either kill this turn or kill the Elspeth this turn and fend off Jim for 2 turns.
It's definitely an interesting situation that he's in. Here are the attacks. Now, one card he doesn't have in his hand is actually a copy of Triton Tactics. And this will allow him to trigger Heroic on both of his creatures. And this is a way to get the job done. Jim's going to take a look. We can do the same. Great combat trick of that limited format. Don't see a lot in Constructed, but it'll have an impact here.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy because I think Jim's in a spot where, well, if he has one block, if he has a trick here, I can't really block, and being able to have a trick that pumps both of your creatures is so efficient right now.
Yeah. That's 2 target creatures each get +0/+3 until end of turn. Untap those creatures. And at this turn's next end of combat, a little complicated there, tap each creature that was blocked by one of those creatures this turn, and it does untap during its controller's next untap. So basically, if you block, a little Frost Breath action.
It is neither in length of text box nor mechanically the cleanest design in the set.
One thing is for sure, it is powerful. And while you don't expect to see that card have a huge role in Constructed, it's certainly just played a role in this game, and it'll have to force Davis to reevaluate how he wants to take his turns. No longer has an Elspeth. He'll take a look here at Mann's graveyard, wants to get a better idea of what Mann has already cast this game. Keep in mind, though, again, Jim doesn't really know Steven Mann's build of this deck. His build of Heroic is different than most. You know, you expect to see cards like Feat of Resistance, for example. Not going to find that.
That card is pretty unwieldy when you're on the draw. 2 mana is a lot to pay for that effect. When you're on the play, it's usually fine, but on the draw, it's rough.
Jim's just going to pass the turn back after considering everything. So we'll go Mann's way.
And that has to give Steve Mann some pause.
Yeah, after watching Jim think about everything for that turn, kind of look at his hand of 4 or 5 cards and just say, all right, your turn. It's always a little bit scary. Now here's Stratus Walk. This is the kind of card that can actually buy out a counterspell. Flying is actually quite good right now.
Well, Jim may be playing to his 1 copy of Devouring Light right now because he has Jason's Ingenuity and Dig Through Time, so a lot of looks at it. So the opportunity cost for him to use a Dissolve here is extremely high.
Well, the Heroic trigger is going to resolve. That doesn't mean the Stratus Walk is going to resolve. That's still likely on the stack. Now it looks like he will use Dissolve. And if you're Steve, your Stratus Walk gets the Dissolve, you're probably pretty happy.
Yep.
Feels like a good exchange just as far as card quality is concerned. You don't think of Stratus Walk as being a major player in this matchup, though in the current situation, it's pretty good.
It is, and these Elspeth tokens represent a lot of time for Jim. What's bad about this for Jim is just the mana required. I think Jim would have preferred to just draw as many cards as possible, get some looks at Devouring Light or some way to bridge the gap to a sweeper. And having to use Dissolve there means he's down the ability to cast Jason's Ingenuity this turn.
Well, here are the attacks. 6-6 Battlewise Hoplite. 2-3 Favorite Hoplite coming in the red zone against those 3 Elspeth Soldier tokens. So some blocking is certainly in order here for Davis. So he wants to get the job done. Is he willing to take 2 points of damage right now? It looks like the answer is yes. Mann will consult his hand. You can see he's got quite a few creatures actually right now. So 2 damage is going to come across. Davis is going to go down to 5. Davis using his life total as a resource right now. The follow-up here is a Seeker of the Way. But the most important card in Mann's hand right now is likely that copy of Stubborn Denial.
And now we get to have the song and dance of do you fight over the card drawers or do you fight over the payoff?
Well, Jim is already reaching for Dig Through Time mana. And that is the big question. Do you fight over this or do you fight over the cards he's going to potentially find? As you have to imagine, they are going to be non-creature spells.
I mean, if you look at Stephen Mann's hand right now, let's say he counters this Dig Through Time. He does not seem that equipped to beat an End Hostilities. It may not even be that equipped to beat an Elspeth at this stage. So he may just have to say, this resolves, and hopefully this does not find too much action. You know, he still has the counter spell to stop 1 big spell, but he may fold to 2 big spells.
Well, Dig is going to resolve. So Davis is going to take a look at 7 cards, and Hostilities among them. There are actually 2 copies of that card, a Nullify and Elspeth too, so really, really nice options here for Davis.
And this gives him a pretty straightforward play pattern here of try to resolve End Hostilities, and if that doesn't work, hopefully survive the turn and get a shot at it next turn.
Yeah. He is at 5 though, life total not very high.
I think he would much prefer to set up something like End Hostilities plus Dissolve, but he may not have that option.
Now keep in mind, those are End Hostilities number 2 and 3. Those are the last ones in the deck, so you've got to make them count. He's a little unsure of himself. It looks like he's going with the 2 End Hostilities. And he has. So we're going to go back Davis's way. Davis will draw. Copy, Dissolve. And you mentioned he loves to set up big spell plus Dissolve as much as he can. You see his mana right now, though, only 7 of it in play.
Yep.
So doesn't have the ability to do that this particular turn.
If he knew the top card of his deck was Dissolve, he could have taken land plus End Hostilities, but of course he doesn't know what the top card of his deck is.
And there's Stubborn Denial. That'll take care of Hostilities. And that's a card that Jim has played around as much as he can for the entirety of the game. It still had a pretty big effect, though. And all Davis can do is pass the turn back and hope he doesn't die. A card like Stratus Walk will likely get the job done here for Mann. Mann will draw a card. Temple of Enlightenment is what he picked up. Here's the attack. There are the blocks. Favorite Hoplite's going to come across. Davis is going to go down to 3. Will Mann deploy any more threats? It's unlikely. He'll play a Temple. Little Scry. Top card will become the bottom card. We're going to head back Davis's way. Davis will draw a card. A land is not a bad place to be there in Flooded Strand.
This is a huge deal, as now he has the opportunity to play End Hostilities and leave up Dissolve.
That's exactly what he's going to do. End Hostilities will be cast. It's going to resolve. And I'll take care of those 3 creatures. And if Davis can make it through this turn, he might be on his way as Mann does draw another land. Now, there's the Trailblazer. You're probably okay letting that one go.
Yeah, I suspect this is not worthy of a counterspell here. Although it's carried sequencing here from Steven. If Jim decides to counter it, it means he can actually get a creature with power into play.
See Jim taking a long look at his hand. He shrugs his shoulders and says, okay, you know what? You can have the 0-4. What's the real prize? What are you actually holding that I'm supposed to counter? Now, there's Hero of Iroas, and Jim very quickly sacrifices his Flooded Strand and goes down to 2. I think he realizes that's the card that you actually want me to counter.
And because he doesn't have another land in hand right now, there's no guarantee he gets to play Elspeth with counterspell backup next turn. So this is a pretty good spot to cash this in.
Flooded Strand going to search up an island here. More cards in the graveyard for Davis. You can see exactly how easy it is for his particular build of blue-eye control to work its way towards dig-through time. He's cast 2 already this game, and his graveyard's full again.
Yeah, it is not hard.
Banishing Light's going to stay on top of the deck. Dissolve is going to resolve. And now it's time for Davis to draw a card. Elspeth, Jason's Ingenuity, Banishing Light all in hand here for number 3 on our Season 1 leaderboard here for 2015. He's looking for Open Series points. He's got to beat somebody very, very good to get him this round, though.
This is still a dangerous place for Jim to be in. I mean, he's not out of the woods just yet. If he just taps out for Elspeth, a lot of things can kill him.
Yeah. Keep mentioning Stratus Walk, but he could very easily Stratus Walk, trigger Heroic, draw into like a Defiant Strike, and then all of a sudden, we're going to game number 2, but it's Stephen Mann who's won it.
And for all Jim knows, Feat of Resistance is in Steve's deck, which just does it straight up.
Yeah. He's in a good spot, but he's not working with perfect information. And Jim is just going to pass the turn back. Now, that's very interesting. Could have cast Elspeth, and I think most players would in that situation, but he elects not to. Much more interested in resolving Jace's Ingenuity. So Mann will draw a card with just his 0-4 in play.
Well, the thing is, nothing that Jim's cards do protect him if Steve has a real hand. So if Steve has something, he's better served just casting Jace's Ingenuity and trying to find an answer. And if he's got nothing, he gets through this turn fine and then can start wrapping up with his powerful tools.
The draw there for Jim off Jason's Ingenuity was very interesting. 3 copies of Radiant Fountain, which you would think wouldn't play a huge role in this matchup because the Heroic deck hits in such large chunks, but given the game state that we're in right now, that's a big deal.
If Steve closes this game out, it's going to be just barely. And as you mentioned, that doesn't happen all the time with the Heroic deck, but that's the game state we're in now.
Here is Elspeth. 3 Soldier Tokens going to come in. Mana Confluence to draw here for Mann. He's stuck with a God's Willing, Mana Confluence, and a copy of Flooded Strand, and he knows he's in trouble now. He'll play Mana Confluence and just pass the turn back. Davis going to quickly untap those 6 lands. Jason's Ingenuity the draw. And how about 6 life now? Radiant Fountain undoing a lot of the work. Here come the Soldier Tokens. Of course, Mann will have the opportunity to block 1 with his 0-4. But Elspeth is ticking up, and it's looking to close this game out as fast as he possibly can.
And Jim is not that far away from just being able to kill Steve himself. I mean, 2 turns away now.
Mann will draw. It's another copy of God's Willing. You know, one thing that Jim kind of regrets on the Players' Championship, and we talked about how it wasn't a great tournament for him, but he was really disappointed with the way that he played against Tom Ross in his elimination match. You know, he won Game 1 pretty easily, but lost Game 2 after making a couple of mistakes that he really regretted, and then Game 3 went Tom's way in a big way. Jim had some mana issues, but Jim said, should never really come to that.
Yeah.
Should have been able to win that one in 2 games, and that's the thing that he thinks about in the tournament. You know, he doesn't really care about the other matches that he lost. That's going to happen when you play against a lot of great players in a tournament, but he said, that's the match I should have won.
It doesn't, yeah, the games where you get, you know, you have issues with mana or the matchup's horrible, it's not even worth focusing on that. The only thing you can do is try to improve the games inside the margins. Nothing else matters.
And I think that, you know, having that loss, maybe playing some more games against Heroic in the meantime, kind of influences the way that he's actually playing this game and probably this match. He learned a lot from that mistake.
Well, the play a couple turns ago, I think, is not something that a lot of players in this room would have been able to do. I think everyone would have looked at that and said, do I Banishing Light? Do I cast Elspeth? Do I Jason's Ingenuity right now? And Jim correctly identified that none of his ostensibly defensive measures actually protect him from Steve's card if Steve has the kill with the cards in his hand. So he's better served just sitting on Jason's Ingenuity than making some sort of play with Banishing Light or Elspeth. That's a very, very hard play to figure out.
The Trailblazers going to come on into the red zone now where it's most comfortable. With just 1 power, Davis is going to go down to 5. But Davis's life total is not a concern at this point. Another copy of Radiant Fountain in hand. Also has a copy of Tranquil Cove. Devouring Light was the draw, just a 1 of in his deck this weekend. You can say his pace of play is certainly picking up now.
And you have to imagine with Dissolve and Devouring Light, it's going to be really hard for Stephen Mann to mount much of anything.
There is Divination, 2 cards, Nullify among them, Elspeth as well. There is Radiant Fountain, up to 7 goes Davis. And he's just looking to close it out. In for 6 more, Mann's going to go down to 11. 3 more soldiers, of course, thanks to Elspeth. Ultimate looming. 3 mana. Now's not a bad time to cast Banishing Light, so he'll give it a shot.
Yeah, he gets to do this in a situation where he would have to discard a hand size anyway, and also has Dissolve plus Devouring Light backup.
Gonna target God's Willing. Jim says that's cool. And Jim will just pass the turn back over to Mann. Mann with his 2/6 will draw a card. Dave's going to consult the graveyard here, pick up some information where he can. It's a Stratus Walk. That's a Nullify. That's not resolving.
Yeah, Jim does not want his Elspeth to get attacked this turn. Just going for the kill.
And that is going to do it. Jim Davis is going to win at game number 1 here over Stephen Mann. Blue-white control up in game over white-blue heroic. See, about 25 minutes left here on the clock, so these players are going to get moving and grooving with sideboarding. We'll do the same. We will start with Mann. What does he have on his side of things?
2 copies of Treasure Clues, 2 copies of Heliod's Pilgrim, an Ordeal of Heliod, Mortal's Ardor, Mortal Obstinacy, erase 2 copies of Stubborn Denial, 3 copies of Glare of Heresy, Bramaz, King of Rescos, and a copy of Ajani's Presence. I like the Ajani's Presence. I think I like bringing in the Bramaz as well, just having additional threats. Glare of Heresy is a pretty good card in this matchup. Jim's got Banishing Light, Elspeth, potentially other target as well. And the 3rd and 4th copy of Stubborn Denial, alongside his 2 copies of Heliod's Pilgrims and his 2 Treasure Cruises. So a lot of good options.
Other side of things for Jim, sideboard looks a lot, like what we saw at the Season 4 Invitational and the Players' Championship. A Faded Retribution, 2 Omen Speakers, a Last Breath, 3 Bramaz, King of Rescos, a card we saw him bring in against Ross in that matchup, 2 Negates, a Whelming Wave, 2 Erases, and 3 copies of Glare of Heresy. Plenty of good options.
Yeah, Glare of Heresy, I think, is great in this matchup. I really like Negate. I think Bramaz is an excellent blocker. Faded Retribution, Last Breath are good options here. I'm not a fan of Erase in this matchup. Most of the enchantments either have some CIP trigger, so they generate value when they come into play, or they're the Ordeals that sacrifice themselves very quickly. So even though Erase is a card that a lot of people bring in this matchup, and seems like it would be good on the surface against a deck packing so many enchantments, in practice, I think Erase is pretty poor in this matchup.
Yeah, I don't love it so much. I don't think things go the way you want it to a lot of the time.
Now, Negate, on the other hand, I can definitely get behind because that's very good at answering these enchantments that trigger when they go on the sack or sacrifice themselves very quickly. Also can be used in a counterspell war over against Steve's Stubborn Denials and potential Negates. But the Erases, I don't think are very good here. I think it's a very common sideboarding mistake in this metagame, people bringing in explicit enchantment removal against white-blue heroic decks, and it often doesn't do anything.
We'll see how both players will sideboard here as they do get ready for game number 2. You have to imagine there'll be about 20 minutes left for them to try to figure out how to work their way through 2 more games. But we will very quickly talk about SCG Game Nights and the newest addition to our creature collection here in the Mammoth token.
Absolutely. This month is Mammoth Month, and every week we send out a kit with 2 pins and 8 foils. Stores, you can give this out any way that you want to at a game night of your choosing, any day of the week, any format that you'd like. If you'd like to get signed up for February, you are running out of time, so head over to StarCityGames.com/game night for more information. Contact your organized play rep over at Star City Games, get your store signed up.
StarCityGames.com/game night for more info as we do turn our attention back to the match between these 2 great players. Again, we saw them at the Players' Championship in Roanoke just a couple of weeks ago. It was a lot of fun watching him play. Of course, we all know by now, Brad Nelson, the winner of that tournament, $20,000 richer, and has a big old trophy, too.
It was a great tournament.
It really, really was. All the players enjoyed it. A lot of viewers, so we thank you guys for watching. We had a lot of fun doing it. Special shout out to Matthias on creating the format of that tournament. Can't wait for it this year, too.
I can't either. It was a great story for Brad to win that sort of event because if you talk to most people, who do you think are the best players in the tournament? Most people would have said Tom Ross and Reed Duke, 1 and 2 in some order, with Brad not third by much, but behind those 2 guys, based on at least 2014 results. But if you ask who's the most dangerous player in this kind of tournament where you know everyone who's playing, it's pretty close to a round-robin style event, and so metagaming skills are at a premium, most people would have said Brad Nelson, and those skills really shine throughout the entire event.
Standard metagaming is his bread and butter. We know that. And though he's not here this weekend, we will get the opportunity to see him next weekend in a format that he's not as comfortable in Legacy. But I imagine perhaps next weekend we'll see a little sneak and show action from him.
Although, again, he is not married to any particular deck. He definitely goes to sneak and show a lot in Legacy, but he's a very fluid, very adaptable deck builder. Will just throw away a deck, even a deck he's had a lot of success with, from week to week if he doesn't feel it's a good choice anymore.
Next weekend, again, will be a 2-day 20K in Philadelphia. We will be doing Legacy there, but we are doing Standard here in Columbus this weekend to kick off 2015. Around 700 players came to do battle, and 2 of the very best starting off at 7-0.
And it's very compelling, for me at least, to watch Jim Davis in action because, again, he's off doing his own thing.
Yep.
People are not playing this deck. This is not a list he copied. This is his own work, and he's had a ton of success with it.
Seeker of the Way is where Mann will start things off. See, Davis does have a copy of Glare of Heresy. He's going to use that to get Seeker off the table right now. No nonsense allowed. Does Mann have a follow-up threat? There's a Plains. The answer is no. If you're Davis, you're thrilled.
It looks like his hand is Defiant Strike, Enchantments, Treasure Cruise, and a land. And that is one of the vulnerabilities of White Blue Heroic. You get these hands where your opponent has 1 removal spell, 1 counter spell, 1 Thoughtseize, and you have a hand of creature enchantments and lands.
Well, let's see where the top card's going to go. A little scry action here from Temple of Enlightenment. It'll become the bottom card here for Davis, and Davis will just pass the turn back over to Mann. Mann will draw. And he will play Temple. Take a look at the top. It'll stay on top and just pass the turn back.
Almost certainly has to be a creature. I think he scries away anything that's not.
Tranquil Cove will come in here for Davis. A little bit of life gain as he goes up to 21. We'll head back Mann's way. Battle-wise Hoplite is a draw, so you're definitely correct about that. The tough part here for Mann is, will it resolve?
And Jim can be very aggressive about using counterspells in this kind of spot because all the writing is on the wall. Steve did nothing for a couple turns. He scried on top, and now he's casting a creature. Jim can probably deduce that Steven's hand is just nothing but enchantments or lands, maybe stubborn denials. Be very aggressive about using counterspells.
Fortunately for Steven Mann, it does get in. Unfortunately for Davis, it does not. Now Davis does have a 5th land to play. It's a Radiant Fountain, and it looks like he will deploy. So he's going to go up to 23 after the trigger. And now here's an attempt at a Banishing Light. So we'll see if this does resolve. It looks like he's going to be replacing a sleeve here in just a moment. Now there is a copy of Defiant Strike. So a little trigger action here. Scry. We assume Davis does have a negate in his hand. See if Mann likes what he sees.
And I think Jim wants to hold the negate in the event that stubborn denial is, or God's willing, something to protect this. He's okay with Steve just cantripping here.
Steve's going to leave that on top. Strike will resolve. Time to draw a card. And it is God's willing. And now here's an attempt. Jim very smart, letting the scry resolve first. See what he wants to do with it, and now he'll counter that.
Yeah.
And now Banish Light will resolve.
It's really important in that scenario because, you know, if you just throw your negate on the table, it definitely influences how Steve scries.
Absolutely.
And people are way too quick to jump on the trigger there, you know? Let him resolve his scry, and then decide what you want to do.
Time to go for a cruise. 3 cards coming here for a man, but that's going to take up basically his entire turn. And while you don't love when your opponent draws 3 cards, you're okay if it'll take up their entire turn, given the situation that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, Jim's deck is flush with much more power, so.
Evolving Wilds is the land. Davis is going to sacrifice this on Mann's upkeep. Mann will continue to take his turn. A little shortcutting here between the 2 players. Island is exactly what Davis did search up. See if Mann's got a creature to deploy now. He certainly hasn't gotten out of the gate this game. And there's a Hero Heroes. And now there's a Stratus Walk. 1 mana Stratus Walk at that. So, little card draw coming. How about another Stratus Walk?
And again, as good as the ordeals are, this is one of those spots where Stratus Walk is really valuable. It's an enchantment that triggers heroic that replaces itself. So it allows you to advantage your board in a fashion. without being a disaster if your opponent simply untaps and kills your creature.
Davis going to go reaching for mana here. Perhaps it is Elspeth time, maybe Banishing Light time. We'll see. It's an attempt at Banishing Light. There's a God's Willing. That'll take care of that. You see Banishing Light still remaining in play. What Mann is doing there is his Banishing Light resolves, and now I will take care of it when it's targeting my creature with God's Willing.
Right.
And part of the reason you see that is because if you just say, okay, God's Willing in response before Banishing Light even resolves, and then Banishing Light does resolve, let's say that's an Ordeal of Thassa, for example. So it's just proper sequencing. It's minor, given the board state, but the correct play to make there if you're Mann.
All this stuff adds up. And as good of a start as Jim had here, his hand's now a mess. I mean, there's 3 copies of Elspeth, and if Stephen Mann is able to find copies of Stubborn Denial, Jim may not be able to really get anything going here.
And Mann has copies of Ordeal of Thassa in hand, not 1, but 2. So he could be drawing 4 cards in just a moment here, and he has a feeling the coast is clear. So he's going to be triggering a row a couple of times this turn.
And making a fairly sizable threat, one could say.
So here come the beatdowns. Trigger the ordeals. 4 cards coming here. A bit of a comeback, perhaps. I think Stubborn Denial among the cards he's drawn. Heliod's Pilgrim is as well. We can't forget about the Ajani's Presence that he has in hand. Jim is certainly in some trouble now.
Yep, and these kind of a vulnerability of this blue-white control list, I think, is when you don't have one of your card drawers, you're trying to trade 1 for 1, and your deck's just less smooth than a lot of other decks.
There's Heliod's Pilgrim. That'll resolve too. Time to go searching. And what was looking like a very easy game for Jim Davis, Treasure Cruise, even though it cost 5 mana and Mann's entire turn, helped turn it all around.
You would not expect for a deck like White-Blue Heroic to be able to make a comeback against blue-white control when the game's gone on for 7 or 8 turns. But that's exactly what Stephen Mann's doing right now.
Temple of Enlightenment going to come in. Top card going to become the bottom one. We're heading back Davis's way. Davis will draw. Copy of Last Breath. That's a little late.
Ship has sailed.
Well, here's Elspeth. Is this going to make it in? Now, what's interesting about this is Mann has the ability to say, okay, that's fine, that resolves because he has a copy of Ajani's Presence in his hand. And perhaps he can save Stubborn Denial for something better. And so there is Ajani's Presence. Absolutely not. And you get a little heroic trigger there, too.
No, it's all gravy. Too much good stuff.
Maybe I'd actually kill him this turn.
I mean, with 1 mana up, there's not a lot he has to play around.
Yeah. Here's Heliod's Pilgrim. And we might be looking at a kill here in just a moment because a hero makes things cheaper. The hero right now is a 10/10. And Heliod's Pilgrim is a point of damage. So that's an attack for 11. You get an ordeal. That's 12 plus 13. The other ordeal is 14 plus 15. Yeah, I'll show you the other one. Yep. Yeah, that's a heck of a comeback.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was great.
That's a hell of a comeback there by Stephen Mann.
Things were looking really grim.
Yeah.
And Jim, kind of in his own way, mulliganed to 5 that game because he was just clawed with so many Elspeths.
Yeah.
2 were stuck in his hand, and the one that he was able to deploy did very little.
It looked like he was so far ahead in that game, just the exchange of resources all went Jim's way, but all of a sudden a Treasure Cruise showed up, and then things got really, really ugly. I thought the game was in a really bad spot for Mann when the Banishing Light plus negate turn happened.
Yeah.
You know, that's the kind of exchange that Jim wants to make. He wins that war. Now he gets to move forward accordingly, but that's not the case. Treasure Cruise and then 2 Ordeal of Thassas. He has to draw 7 extra cards that game.
I think Jim really needs Jace's Ingenuity or Dig Through Time to really be able to leverage some sort of advantage there. Instead of just playing draw step to draw step, and all of his reactive tools don't always work at the right time, or they're walking into Stubborn Denial, or, you know, you saw Last Breath drawn when the threat in play is at 9/9. You know, those are issues for Jim's deck in the matchup.
Game number 3 going to be underway here between these 2 great players. We'll be heading that way in just a moment, but very quickly we will talk about Winter Regionals taking place February 7th and the 8th.
Yeah, this is an exciting tournament series that we're running the weekend of the Pro Tour. All the dates and the venues have been announced, so go over to starcitygames.com/regionals for more information. Look up the venue closest to you, play for Open Series points, prizes, and of course a free play mat for the first 200 players who register for each event.
Squirrels are all here. It's Acorn Mystic, Force of Squirrel, Squirrel Confidant, and
Squirrel Storm.
Squirrel Storm, thank you. I'm sorry. I don't cast Brainstorm, so I don't ever think of it.
It's okay. I usually get the force of squirrel messed up here.
Okay, I never cast Squirrel Storm.
We both have holes in our game. It's fine.
Together, it is Squirrel Deathblade.
Yeah.
Bang, there it is. Free and exclusive to the first 200 players that do attend. So make sure you come hang out February 7th and the 8th, starcitygames.com/regionals for more information.
When are we going to fill out the rest of the deck? We need,
Good question.
Squirrel Right Shaman,
Squirrel Cruise.
Squirrel Skull.
No, I won't let him do that. That's where I draw the line.
It's just too bad.
That's it. Can't have that.
I mean, the line has to be drawn somewhere, I suppose.
Absolutely. Tranquil Cove's going to start it off here for Davis. He's up to 21. Tempo of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. It'll stay on top there for Mann. Back to Davis we go. Radiant Fountain's the draw. But a Plains will be the play. Mann will draw. Favorite Hoplite. See if that resolves. It will. Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at the top card. Perhaps that's the bait for the last breath. Oh. It's dead either way.
Yeah. Again, the control player in this matchup can't mess around trying to time the tricks in such a way to get a 2-for-1. You just have to cast your stuff because you're playing into God's Willing and all sorts of other effects by getting too fancy.
Pluto Delta will come down. That's important there, as that's another blue source of mana there for Davis. 2 mana. It's a hero. Jim can't sacrifice that Delta fast enough. I smell a Nullify. And you see Steve's already put it in the graveyard, so he knows it's going to get counted. There is Nullify. This is the kind of game that Jim wants to play.
And this is why sequencing is so important here. If he does it the other way around, then what happens is Hero of Iroas resolves with a mana up, and Jim has Last Breath in hand. And we've seen that's all sorts of bad news for Jim.
The draw is Hero of Iroas yet again here for Mann. See, he's also got a Plains to play. A couple copies of God's Willing. Let's see a Treasure Cruise too, a card that played a huge role in things the last game. Allows Steve to play a little bit longer into the games. Much longer than game number 1, that's for sure.
And I love this play from Steven Mann, not casting the Hero Iroas into that much open mana. Here's the thing. Even if he casts it this turn, it's because he's essentially saying, well, you can't dig through time or Jace's Ingenuity on the 4th turn. If I cast something this turn and use a counterspell, that's keeping you off the card drawer. So he's trying to burn Jim's 4th turn at the expense of his more valuable 5th turn, where a lot more options are opened up to him. That is just a great play that, again, it's all subtle. It makes, if you're not paying attention to everything that's going on, it may not even make any sense. But Steven Mann is very conscious of the sequencing of cards that Jim has afforded to him, the important spells that are in his deck, and is trying to make Jim pass through a turn where he has nothing else to do with his mana and make him play less efficiently going forward.
This is the Banishing Light. That's a God's Willing in response. God's Willing going to resolve. Scry. Looks like it's going to stay on top. And we're going to go back Mann's way. Davis unable to cast Devouring Light right now. His mana messing with him a little bit. He's drawn a couple colorless lands there in Radiant Fountains. Let's see if Mann wants to make a move. Looks like he does. Ordeal of Thassa, trigger Heroic. Don't want to forget that.
And Steve is informed enough about the matchup where he knows that Jim's going to pick a fight if he can on the previous turn.
Yeah.
So are you 100% sure Ordeal of Thassa is good to go in that spot? Maybe not. But if Jim could have followed through last turn and done something like Dissolve or, another removal spell, he probably would have just done it last turn. So it's a very good spot to decide to try to seek your Ordeal of Thassa, even though, again, you can't be 100% sure it's going to resolve.
Davis picked up an island. You see his hand, Devouring Light, Island, Dig Through Time. Some pretty good cards over there, but he's got to be able to cast them, and he's got about 6 minutes to do it in. He'll go with a Banishing Light. How about a God's Willing? That'll get the job done yet again. Hero Rose gets even bigger. Little scry action here. Top card becomes the bottom one. An island there for Davis. But only 3 cards in the graveyard along with 4 lands. A little short for Dig.
Exactly. By not casting that Hero of Iroas, that meant, and then casting it on Jim's 5th turn instead, it meant that turn 5 has gone by, dig through time has not been resolved. Turn 6 has gone by, still hasn't resolved. Turn 7's gone by, still in Jim's hand.
Defiant Strike will draw a card, make hero a little bit bigger. More damage coming across. If you're Mann, you know the coast is clear. Don't have to worry about Devouring Light. Only one white mana untapped over there.
Again, that play is so small, but it is likely the difference between Jim having resolved dig through time by now and it still being clogged in his hand.
Here's a favorite hoplite. Mann feeling confident enough to maybe put some more things on the board. Now there's a passing of the turn, so we're going to go back to Davis. Davis will draw a copy and negate. Not a bad draw, but not the best one. And now all Jim can do is pass the turn back. It'll be a fight over this Devouring Light, I have a feeling. Mann will draw Plains for the turn. You see the God's Willing in his hand. Perhaps he wants to start off by going for a cruise.
Yeah, the more resources he can pull into combat with him, the better.
And he will start by going for a cruise. Delve 5, it'll cost 3. Does Davis want to negate this or not? He's going to look at the cards that have been removed, see what he has to worry about. 2 God's Willing have already been cast this game. And Jim will reach for negate. That will take care of the cruise. 2 cards left here for Davis. Here come the attackers. No effects, an attempt at a Devouring Light. God's Willing says no. Third one of the game there for Mann. Trigger Heroic. Hero gets a little bit bigger, a little scry here. Take a look at the top card. It'll stay on top. Bunch of damage going to come across though.
And again, 5 cards now in Jim's graveyard. Again, dig through time, can't resolve here. Jim's got to use mana this turn where he's going to be a lot more taxed.
A Plains. That Plains is important because if you see Jim's mana right now, after he plays his dig through time, he only has 4 left. So an untapped Plains is a big deal if he finds that hostilities here.
Yep.
So he'll take a look at the top 7. He'll choose 2. See what he can find. I don't see any hostilities there. I've got an Elspeth, a Bramaz, some other options.
And a race, a negate.
Looks like a Radiant Fountain in there as well, but it does not look like any hostilities at this point. Perhaps even a Banishing Light is an option there as well. And if he believes the Banishing Light can get the job done, we'll see. But he needs to get a little bit fortunate here.
Well, the problem with Banishing Light is he's dead to a whole lot of cards.
Yep.
I mean, anything that targets the favorite hoplite.
Well, they're the 2 cards it'll take.
With that said, there may not be a suitable alternative.
Yeah, this might be the only line that he can take. Dig through time, always a tough card to cast. He's got to figure out exactly what he wants. We could be in a situation here where he says, I'm going to take Banishing Light, I'm going to take Elspeth. Banishing Light your hero. Hope you don't kill me, and maybe Elspeth can stabilize and then win me the game.
And all of this is a consequence of Steve being patient with his spells and timing them in such a way to make things as prohibitive as possible for Jim to cast his card drawers. That's what this all comes down to.
Steve will draw. It's a Stratus Walk. Trigger Heroic. Cantrip. Draw a card. Attack, and that is going to do it. Steven Mann's going to win this match here over Jim Davis. White-Blue Heroic will take down Blue-White Control. And if you're wondering how he got to 8-0, you shouldn't be now. Very, very well-played game.
Yeah, I mean, that, again, passing on that Hero of Iroas there and waiting until Jim had 5 mana with 3 cards in the graveyard, that's probably the difference between winning and losing that match. And I don't